They told us the ice was lifeless, but they never asked what lies beneath it. 12,000 years ago, something was buried, not forgotten, not dead, just waiting. And now the ice is cracking. The wind howls across a dead continent, not the wind of a storm, but the wind of a memory, one that has circled this place for ages, never resting. A whisper lost to time. This is Antarctica, a land most consider sterile, silent, lifeless. But it wasn't always this way. Beneath the miles of ice, deeper than radar can reach, older than the pyramids, something waits. Before there was history, there was prehistory. A time not written in books, but carved in stone, whispered in ruins, buried in ice. They called them myths, legends. But myths do not leave bones. Legends do not distort magnetic fields. It began with a single expedition. A team of 5 researchers, geologists, glaciologists, one cryptohistorian, following a signal no one else believed in. Deep sensor readings suggested a cavity nearly 2 kilometers below the surface, perfectly circular and warm. They drilled, through layers of compressed millennia, through storms, through static, through silence, until they heard the sound. Not a voice, not a beast, a resonance like the humming of a world long gone. Then, the camera stopped transmitting, and they were never heard from again. That would have been the end of it. Another lost expedition, another mystery written off as weather, another gap in the record. But 2 years later, their broadcast returned. Not a cry for help, not a log, just one sound, a low rising growl followed by a whisper, "We were never alone." Since then, no one dares go back. But it's too late. The ice is cracking and what's beneath is waking. They said it was just a signal glitch, that the low growl and whisper were caused by glacial pressure. Echoes through ice, but echoes don't leave footprints. 3 weeks after the signal, a second team arrived. This time they weren't scientists, they were search and recovery. And something else. The only records we have are recovered fragments from their field logs. The first entry? We found the stone. The slab wasn't natural, it was carved, etched in spirals and glyphs that shimmered under torchlight. It was warm to the touch, they said it hummed. Beside it, they found something else, a tunnel, perfectly smooth, melted, not dug, like something enormous had slid through, recently. They followed it, of course, down into the ice, past layers untouched for 12,000 years. The tunnel curved, as if it were alive. On the second day, they reached a chamber. It wasn't natural. The walls were marked, the ceiling domed. In the center, a circle of stone spires pointed upward, like frozen fangs. In the middle was the footprint, nearly 4 meters long, with 5 claws, and beside it, carved into the ice like a signature, a glyph in the shape of a spiral eye. One of them reached out to touch the mark. They say he screamed before he touched it, that he saw something the rest could not, that he never spoke again. The logs ended there. The team was never recovered. But the chamber wasn't empty when the third group arrived. It was colder, and the footprint had changed. Something beneath the ice had stirred, and whatever left those prints was no longer asleep. The third expedition didn't return either, but before they vanished, they uploaded one image. A spiral glyph burned into the wall. The same glyph found in a 13th century monastery in southern France. The scroll was labeled Custodes Meridiani, Guardians of the South. It spoke of ancient watchers buried in the ice, bound not by death but by silence. Monks claimed to have seen visions, beasts beneath crystal towers, cities swallowed by frost, and voices whispering in languages older than man. The order kept it secret, passed only between certain abbots and archivists. Not even the church dared touch it. They feared it wasn't prophecy, but memory. But one monk broke the vow. In 1287 he vanished from the order, taking 3 scrolls with him. He traveled south, all the way to the edge of the known world. Weeks later, a ship was found drifting off the coast of Tierra del Fuego. No crew, no sails, just frozen ropes and bloodstains on the deck. In the captain's cabin, 1 scroll remained, water damaged but readable. It described the South Gate, a place beyond all maps, where stone and ice were one. Beneath the gate, he wrote, "The sleepers do not dream, they listen." After that, the scroll ends. Not in words, but in burn marks, as if it had tried to erase itself. For centuries, the order buried the truth. But now explorers are finding what was once forbidden: symbols, structures, echoes. The South is speaking again. The ice doesn't hide secrets, it holds them, and it remembers everything. The South began to change. The ice no longer creaked, it pulsed. The wind no longer whistled, it whispered. And those who listened heard something else. The whispers came first, not in any known tongue. They drifted through the camps, low and rhythmic, like a forgotten prayer. On the third night they began to dream the same dream, a tower of ice rising from black water, at its peak an eye, open, watching. One woke screaming. He'd scratched the spiral into the tent wall, over and over again. His nails were gone. The ice wasn't just reflecting heat, it was absorbing sound. Conversations vanished mid-air. Machines stopped functioning near the fissure. One night they heard the chime, a single tone like glass breaking inside their skulls, and then silence. But something had changed in the air. Lights began to appear, hovering just beneath the ice. They moved with purpose, and they weren't reflections. The ice wasn't cracking anymore. It was breathing. One man recorded the sound. He played it back. The file was empty, but he heard it in his bones. That night, the spiral returned, not on a wall, but in the sky. The ice gave way on the seventh day, a collapse, sudden, like something had exhaled and cleared a path. The team descended. The walls were smooth, not natural. Carved, layered, ribbed, like the inside of a great machine or the belly of something that had once moved. Then they saw it. First the tusks, thick as trees, curled like temples. Then the skull, massive, fractured, embedded in crystal ice. And finally, its eye. It wasn't just a mammoth. It was older, bigger, and carved across its bones were glyphs, symbols no creature should bear. They walked the length of it, from tusk to tailbone, nearly 90 meters, and still more bone lay beneath the ice. Beside the beast there were statues, or they thought they were statues. Until one of them blinked. Not dead, not alive, suspended, as if waiting for a signal or a command. One of them reached out. Ice cracked, the air shifted, a heartbeat, not theirs. The ground began to hum, the glyphs lit up, and the eye blinked. They ran, but they were already inside it, and it had begun to wake. Long before the ice, before human memory, before the oceans rose and the sun dimmed, the earth belonged to something else. They walked not on 2 legs, nor 4, but many, and some floated. Others carried cities on their backs. They spoke in vibrations. Their thoughts shaped stone. They did not build machines, they grew them. In the south, they built a sanctuary, not for worship, but for containment. Not for enemies, but for themselves. Their minds were too vast, their dreams too dangerous. If left unchecked, they risked tearing the world apart with thought alone. So they slept, sealed themselves beneath ice and time, and trusted that none would ever wake them. But the earth turned, the ice came, humanity rose and forgot. The pyramids came later, the myths came later, but the whispers were always there, echoes of something ancient and unfinished. Some remembered, the scrolls, the glyphs, the monks, the warnings, but they were too few, too late. Now, the colossi stir, and the world once ruled by their dreams prepares to dream again. The crater was discovered by accident, a magnetic anomaly, a failed drone, but the satellite images told a different story. A perfect ring beneath the ice. It wasn't a crater from impact, it was too symmetrical. It looked designed. A third expedition was launched, this time with silence. No press, no announcements, just a small team, handpicked. One of them kept a journal. "The walls are too clean," he wrote. "No ice buildup, no erosion. It's as if this place refuses time." They reached the center, not a temple, not a tomb, a throne, empty, waiting. All around it statues, robed, hooded, human-shaped, but they weren't statues. The journal notes end here. The final page is a sketch of the throne, and a single phrase beneath it, "The guardians still serve." The team never left the crater. Their equipment was found outside, still warm, but the throne was no longer empty. A transmission was received, no voice, no data, just a symbol, the spiral. We used to think the crater was a scar, but what if it was a gate? What if it was never meant to be found? The vial arrived sealed in lead, retrieved from beneath the throne. It pulsed faintly, a drop of blood, still warm. They analyzed it in silence, protein chains unbreakable, DNA strands endless, carbon dating failed. The machine returned a single number. The cells were alive, but they didn't divide, they didn't decay, they responded to sound, to rhythm, and to glyphs. One experimenter sang just a note, accidental. The blood changed color, from red to black. That night he collapsed, his veins spiral-shaped under the skin, his breath steam, his eyes white. The others quarantined him, but he never screamed, never moved. He only whispered, It's not blood, it's memory. The lab was abandoned, sealed in ice. When they returned weeks later, the room was warm. The blood was gone. It had moved, through the ice, through the walls, looking, listening. A final test was attempted. They sent a signal into the blood. Not electromagnetic, not ultrasonic. A name. The blood responded. It grew. It remembered what it once was, and what it still is. The storms came first. Not from the sky, but from the ground. Snow rose instead of falling. Wind curled inward, like something beneath was breathing. Then the ice cracked. Not one fissure. Hundreds all at once, from the Arctic to Antarctica. A global heartbeat. Compasses failed. Satellites blinked. The stars above shifted, ever so slightly. And somewhere in a cave deep below, a voice whispered back. The Guardians began to vanish. Not destroyed, not attacked, just missing. Their robes found frozen, standing where they once were. Under the crater something opened, a spiral gate not built, formed by will. From it light poured upward, not white, not warm, ancient. It didn't illuminate, it remembered. One figure emerged from the ice, not fully formed, a shadow of the Colossus once buried, bones of light, skin of frost, eyes, spiral suns. It didn't speak, but its presence silenced everything. Machines died, birds fell mid-flight, the air bent around it. It walked once, the glacier cracked for miles, and somewhere far away, another eye opened. The ice giants were no longer sleeping. They were searching, for each other, for what was lost, for what comes next. The world didn't end, it folded. Past and present twisted together like roots beneath the snow. Time stopped moving forward, it moved inward. Cities flickered, satellites blinked out. People forgot what year it was, not because of fear, but because something older had begun to remember. The ice pulsed across continents. Spiral gates opened in places no one expected. A desert, a forest, a city street. The giants did not invade, they returned, to homes long buried, to temples erased, to thrones left behind. They did not roar, they sang, low, deep beneath hearing. The earth shook in harmony. Some humans heard it in dreams, others in breath, a few in their bones. They remembered the before time, and they followed. The spiral didn't end, it turned, and time with it. Not a loop, not a line, a tide. The deep time had returned, not to destroy, but to rewrite, not with war, but with remembrance. The final gate opened at the pole. No one crossed it, or perhaps we all did. And beneath the silence, the giants walked again. Not as monsters, not as gods, but as memory.